There are places in Cornwall where the landscape feels ancient. Not just old, but properly old. Places where the stones beneath your feet were here long before churches, castles and roads. And probably long before anyone thought it was a good idea to invent parking charges. Welcome to West Penwith, a landscape scattered with prehistoric monuments, standing stones, stone circles and burial chambers. And among them are three particularly fascinating places: the Mên-an-Tol, Lanyon Quoit and the Nine Maidens of Boskednan. Three ancient monuments, three very different sites. And, as you might expect in Cornwall, a rather impressive collection of legends. Because when something has been standing in the same field for several thousand years, well, eventually someone is going to make up a story about it. And Cornish folklore has never been short of imagination. Let's begin with perhaps the most recognisable of the three, the Mên-an-Tol. The name is Cornish and roughly translates as stone and hole, which, to be fair, doesn't really leave much to the imagination. And standing here, look, you can see exactly why. At the centre is a large circular stone with a hole cut through it, whilst on the other side are these upright stones. The whole arrangement is surprisingly simple, but its purpose remains uncertain. The monument dates back thousands of years to Cornwall's prehistoric past. And that uncertainty is part of what makes places like this so fascinating. We can look at the stones, we can measure them, we can study the landscape around them, but we can't simply ask the people who built them what they had in mind, which is rather inconvenient. Imagine the archaeology if they had left us instructions. Dear future people, we built this stone circle for religious purposes. Please stop guessing. But sadly, they didn't. But the Mên-an-Tol became something more than an archaeological monument. It became a place of folklore. For generations, people believed that the hole in the stone possessed healing properties. There are traditions of people passing through the opening in the hope of curing illness. And children were associated particularly strongly with these beliefs. According to local tradition, passing a child through the hole could help protect them or cure certain ailments. There are also stories of adults crawling through the stone themselves. Although frankly, after a certain age, squeezing through a giant granite hole in the middle of Cornwall sounds less like a medical treatment and more like something my knees would strongly object to. But these traditions tell us something important. People didn't simply see the Mên-an-Tol as a pile of prehistoric stones. They saw it as a place of power, a place where the ordinary world and the supernatural world might overlap. And Cornwall has plenty of stories about what might live on that other side. Cornish folklore is filled with piskies, spirits and mysterious beings. And ancient stones were often woven into these stories. The idea of passing through an opening to gain protection or healing has echoes in ancient folk traditions across Britain. Whether the Mên-an-Tol was actually designed for such a purpose is impossible to prove. But perhaps that's beside the point, because folklore doesn't always preserve what happened. Sometimes it preserves what people believed might happen, and those beliefs can survive for centuries. So, when you stand at the Mên-an-Tol today, you're looking at two different kinds of history. There's the archaeological history, and then there's the history people created around it. One is written in stone, the other is written in stories. And sometimes the stories are considerably more entertaining. From the Mên-an-Tol, our journey takes us towards another extraordinary monument, Lanyon Quoit. And if the Mên-an-Tol looks mysterious, then Lanyon Quoit looks as though someone has parked a small prehistoric house on the moor. The monument is a portal dolmen. It's a type of prehistoric burial chamber. Its huge capstone rests upon enormous upright stones. When you stand beneath it, you immediately get a sense of the sheer amount of effort involved. These weren't lightweight garden ornaments. We're talking about enormous pieces of granite, moved, positioned, and raised by people living thousands of years ago, without cranes, without engines, and presumably without someone asking, could we possibly get a JCB over here? Lanyon Quoit is believed to have been associated with burial practices. These monuments were part of a prehistoric landscape in which the dead were placed within or beneath the great stones. And perhaps there's something fitting about that. The people who built these monuments knew that human life was temporary, but the stone could remain. Generation after generation could pass while the monument stayed. And Lanyon Quoit certainly has had its share of dramatic moments. In 1815, a violent storm caused this monument to collapse. The great capstone came down and several stones were displaced. And for a while, Lanyon Quoit looks very different from the monument we see today. Then, in the early 19th century, it was reconstructed. So, what we're looking at today isn't quite the monument as prehistoric builders originally left it. It's a monument with its own biography. Built thousands of years ago, damaged by time and weather, and eventually put back together. Which makes you wonder what the prehistoric builders would think of what we've done with their work. And now we come to perhaps the most haunting of the three, the Nine Maidens of Boskednan, or more accurately, what remains of them. This was once part of a prehistoric stone circle. Today though, only some of the stones survive standing. But the name has survived, and with it, a rather memorable legend. According to the story, 9 young women were dancing on a Sunday. They had apparently decided, well, that dancing was more important than observing the Sabbath. And Cornwall, like many places with a healthy supply of folklore, was not especially impressed. So the women were punished and turned to stone. And so, according to legend, the stones became the Nine Maidens. Now, there's an obvious problem with this story. These stones are prehistoric, and the legend came much later. Also, archaeology gives us no evidence that nine dancing women were transformed into granite. But folklore doesn't really care about inconvenient things like chronology. And perhaps that's why this story has lasted. Because there's something strangely evocative about looking at a circle of ancient stones and imagining they were once people. People who laughed, people who danced, people who had absolutely no idea that thousands of years later we'd still be standing here talking about them. So, why 9? The number 9 also appears surprisingly often in Cornish folklore. There are 9 maidens, 9 witches, 9 sisters, and various other traditions involving groups of 9 supernatural beings. Numbers have always mattered in folklore. They give stories rhythm. 9 feels deliberate, memorable, almost magical. And when you've got 9 stones standing on a windswept Cornish moor, well, it's practically begging for a story. So, what were these monuments actually built for? That's where things become fascinating. The Mên-an-Tol, Lanyon Quoit, and the Nine Maidens belong to a prehistoric landscape created by communities whose beliefs we can only partly reconstruct. We can study the archaeology, we can examine the stones, we can look at their position within the wider landscape. But we can't hear the ceremonies that once took place here. We don't know the prayers, we don't know the songs, we don't know the stories they told around their fires. And we certainly don't know whether anyone was standing beside one of these stones 3,000 or 4,000 years ago complaining about the weather. Although, given that it's Cornwall, I'd say there's a reasonable chance. A Cornish heatwave. I'm glad I wore my walking boots. My left one's completely full of water. What makes West Penwith so special is that these monuments don't exist in isolation. They're part of a much larger prehistoric landscape. Stone circles, stand-in stones, burial chambers, field systems, these ancient pathways, all scattered across the moors. And when you walk between them, you begin to understand something. These weren't just random stones placed in random fields. They were part of a landscape that meant something to the people who lived here. It's a landscape of memory, of ritual, of death, of community, and perhaps of stories. The legends attached to these places came much later, but they became part of the landscape too. The healing stone of the Mên-an-Tol, the fallen and reconstructed Lanyon Quoit, and the dancing maidens of Boskednan. Fact and folklore have become tangled together, and perhaps we shouldn't always try to separate them completely, because history tells us what we can establish. Folklore tells us what people imagined, and together they give us something richer, a sense of how the landscape has been experienced by generation after generation. So, the next time you're standing beside an ancient Cornish stone, take a moment, look at its surface, look at the weathering, look at the landscape around it, and remember that this stone was already ancient when many of the things we consider old today didn't even exist. The Mên-an-Tol has seen people pass through its mysterious opening. Lanyon Quoit has fallen and risen again, and the stones of Boskednan have watched centuries roll across the moor. Perhaps the stories aren't literally true. Perhaps no maidens were ever turned to stone, and perhaps the Mên-an-Tol never possessed magical healing powers. Also, perhaps the Piskies have better things to do. But standing here, with the wind moving across the grass, it is easy to understand why people created these stories. Because some places simply invite a little mystery, and Cornwall has never been shy of providing it. 3 monuments, thousands of years, countless stories, and stones that have outlived almost everyone who ever stood beside them. They don't speak, at least not in any language we recognise. But if you stand quietly enough, you might just hear them. If you've enjoyed today's journey, thank you for joining me, and please remember to like and subscribe. Until next time, remember, Cornwall is always whispering.